So Steve was our LGR session moderator for the shelter session.
I want to bring Rich up with me because I think in our session, Rich came up with, I don't want to say came up with, but really pushed a lot of valuable information, and Rick too. And what we want to express to people is that as LGR, you know, we felt like one of the big needs is to make something happen. And we do feel like a lot of the conversation that has been out there is that a lot of stuff's been kind of sitting around in the wings and not happening, and nothing's getting done. And so you feel that pressure to get something done, and I think we're feeling a little bit pressure to try and come up with some shelter or something like that to make things happen. And Rich did a great job of really illuminating the fact that we need to really do a better job of getting the numbers figured out and everything first. So I want to have him kind of come up and give a brief description, because he went through it so fast and it made a lot of sense that I can't do it. So I think that LGR, I think, could be very supportive in this process. I think LGR could provide a lot of support in helping to do what he's suggesting that we do. And I think we as a group are going to have to talk about that, and we're going to have to figure out the money that we've collected and gotten through donations and everything, what are we going to do with it? And I think that a lot of it potentially could really help with a lot of what he's talking about, and it could set the foundation for what may take 5 or 10 years. I don't know, hopefully not 20 years, but 5 or 10 years to get to where we want to go. So I invite Rich up.
Thank you. No. Hello, my name is Rich Hooks-Wyman, and I'm with an organization called Hearth Connection, and we actually support supportive housing here in the area for adults that have multiple barriers to long-term homelessness and trying to stabilize them. We work closely with Zumbro Valley Mental Health, but in my former life, I was the director of a homeless youth outreach program in the Twin Cities, and have worked around a lot with homeless youth systems. And I think the thing that happens in many communities when they're first trying to address youth homelessness is they do want to do something. That we know these kids are being exploited, we know that there's safety issues, we know that there's great need, and we just want to do something. And oftentimes that first response is, well, let's just get a shelter because we just need bed spaces and then everything will be okay. But one of the challenges is that, so then a youth goes to a shelter bed, and in 30 days they still have no job, no income, no education, no connection to family. And where do you put them? There's no housing, there's no connection to family, and you just perpetuate the cycle. It's not that there's not a need for shelter here in this area, but I think we have to think about youth homelessness as an arc. And in that arc, there are different types of youth that are homeless. You have homeless youth that are homeless with their families. You have homeless youth that are alone. You have homeless youth that are recent runaways. They just ran away from home. There are some youth that are in what they call episodic or transitional homelessness. They're in and out of crisis. They're in their cousin's house for a while, then they're on the streets. They go back home for a while, then they're staying in a shelter. They kind of go in and out of homelessness. And then you also have youth that are long-term homeless, those people that become street dependent and oftentimes experience sexual exploitation and trauma and violence in street environments. The problem in looking at that arc is that the intervention changes depending on what population lens you're looking. Tom did a really great job of coming from HUD to talk about the fact that there are resources from the federal government to design, build, and maintain programs to support homeless youth, but they vary. Some are transitional housing, some are emergency shelter, and some are permanent supportive housing. And the interventions look differently depending on what population you're doing. My suggestion is that, and I'm an outsider, so I'm just doing this with a grain of salt, but coming from the Twin Cities where we've dealt with this situation for 2 decades and more, having a house is not always the solution. And my suggestion for you is to think about the limited resources you have, those couples of tens of thousands of dollars that you're getting from the foundation and the business community, and to think about this as a sustainability initiative, that you're trying to build a spectrum of services. Emergency shelter, case management services, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing. All of that is a spectrum. Some kids will need parts of that, some kids will need all of it. But in order to get from here today, which is we don't have much on our plate, to this big spectrum, you need to have a sustainability and a business plan, and you need to get better data. And what I'm hearing today is that we don't have really great identification of who these youth are. Are they 14-year-old runaways? Are they 17-year-old transitional kids? Or are they 21-year-old youth who have multiple disabilities who need long-term care? Until we get that information, that data, you're not going to be able to draw more funds into this program because people won't have a vision of what you're trying to do. So my suggestion is use your limited pots of money to do a better environmental scan, assessment of the community, system reform, and outreach to the community. Kids are about relationships. I want to change because I'm in a relationship with somebody, and when I'm homeless and I'm vulnerable, I'm not in a relationship with anybody, and simply setting up some center over here that says go to that center, well, why would I trust anybody at that center when everybody else has abused or neglected me in my life? If you have a community outreach program that actually engages youth in trusting relationships, non-judgmental engagement, they start to build a relationship, and then they're more readily accessible to actually give you information about their life history, document what their needs are, and then you start to design programs to address those situations. I talk really fast and I pack a lot of really trivial information, so I'm hoping I'm not boring people, but that was my suggestion. So if you're interested, my suggestion is think about this as a sustainability issue and work to try to build the continuum.
So I think it's safe to say that most of us sitting in the room sat and listened and went, yeah, that makes sense. So I think in a big way we have a place to start as far as this goes with our conversation, and the continuum of care in our area down in this southeast region has, thankfully to all the things that have been happening here for the last several months, they've actually formed now a youth committee. They're planning on putting together a youth committee. Most people admit that homelessness was a big issue. They've done a lot of work on it, but they've missed youth. And now we have somebody targeting youth, and we have a plan. Hopefully we can start to put something together and say, because that was a problem for us when we first started out as a group. We were gonna help tackle youth homelessness, and then we started asking each other, well, how many youth homeless are there out there? Well, I don't know how many there are. Well, the school says there's 200. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot, actually, although we're using that number because at least it has some effect. But something like this would be, take a few years and hopefully give us a good foundation. And I think, I praise all of our fellow members for getting this start to this point. So thank you.